The JBL Bar 300 is an all-in-one soundbar that has virtual Dolby Atmos support, not to be confused with the fully fledged Dolby Atmos. Now in the UK, it can be found for roughly £350, at least at the time of filming. In this review, you can be comparing it to some of its rivals and to see if it's actually worth its price tag. Now to kick off this review, I would like to quickly touch upon its design, and here I've got no sort of complaints with it. It's also got a pretty small form factor and therefore should fit on most sort of cabinet setups. You can of course wall mount it if you so wish. The product dimensions will be on your screen right now. Now aside from this, the soundbar itself has also got physical buttons found at the top of it, which are certainly appreciated as it prevents any sort of mistouch operations over some of its rivals that opt for touch sensitive buttons. Aside from this, you also have a forward-facing LED screen, which is quite handy for you to know what settings you're adjusting or indeed the metadata that's being played through the soundbar. Speaking of which, if you do want to adjust your settings from afar, there's a bundled remote. It's very stylish and provides you all the right options that you need. Now further expanding on that, there is also a virtual remote control that can be accessed via the JBL One app, and it's certainly appreciated in case you lose your physical remote control. Then you also have a 3-band EQ. Although it's a little bit limiting, it's good to see some degree of customization. Although if you were to disable the EQ and re-enable it, it won't remember your last used mode. So it would have been great if the manufacturer integrated some user profiles that one could save. But alas, at the time of filming, that's not the case. Now aside from all that, it should be really commended that JBL have integrated room calibration directly from the app and indeed as a soundbar at its price point, because a lot of its competitors do not offer said feature, and this will certainly be appreciated for those people who want to get the most out of the soundbar. So moving swiftly on, we get onto connectivity, and here it's great to see that Google Chromecast, Apple AirPlay and Alexa MRM are all supported over Wi-Fi. Indeed here the 2.4 and 5 GHz frequencies are supported, and all of this adds to the overall wireless transmission quality that one can attain. In other words, if you want to have your high quality music streaming services playing through this soundbar, well, you can do that via the inclusion of Wi-Fi. Now if you do want to just quickly pair up to the speaker, for example if you have a friend or relative that comes over, then you've got Bluetooth, although it should be mindful here that the lowest quality SBC codec is supported and therefore will not give you this full sort of transmission quality, nor in terms of the overall utmost audio quality that one can attain, so therefore only use it sparingly. Now in order for you to connect over to your TV, there is of course physical connections. There's optical and also HDMI, whereby the ARC and eARC standards are supported, giving you uncompressed Dolby Atmos data that can be fed through directly through the soundbar. There is also a singular HDMI input. This, as far as I'm aware, is using the HDMI 2.0 standard and thus can feed through 4K 60Hz, but will not be able to feed through any sort of modern day consoles, in other words 4K 120. It should also be mindful that it does also support pass-through of Dolby Vision, which will be of appreciation for certain video files out there. So with all of that out of the way, let's get on to a sound demo. I appreciate it's not going to be ideal over YouTube and won't give you a lifelike reproduction, but still will give you a little bit of a taster. Here I'll be playing back Priya J's track titled Like Me, and then going to a piece to camera whereby I'll be presenting the VW ID.5 on Totally EV. Make sure you check out the annotations on your screen to understand how the soundbar is currently operating. Otherwise pretty much near on identical. You've got a stylish tail light design which stretches the width of the vehicle, and you've even got a cool little animation each time you lock or unlock the vehicle. Of course you can disable this if you don't like it. At the front you've got these stylish headlights and you've got this sort of bubble shaped design towards the bumper. It certainly stands out in comparison to other vehicles on the road and is very much in line with the rest of the Volkswagen ID line. Now as for its side profile, we absolutely love the use of integrated door handles. They're very intuitive to use, unlike some rival offerings, and also reduce the drag coefficient because they're not protruding from the vehicle. Speaking of which, over here, the wheel arches don't protrude either, although it's a shame to see that Volkswagen have still integrated plastic wheel arches. So with the audio demo out of the way, I should also point out the soundbar setup. Now here there are 6 audio drivers that are comprised within its shell. There is 5 racetrack drivers and 2 0.75 inch tweeters. The combination outputs 260 watts of total power and will give you a frequency range from 50 Hz all the way up to 20 kHz. Note, you cannot pair a subwoofer to the soundbar, even if you were to purchase it as an additional extra. Something worth pointing out in case you were interested in upgrading at a later date. Equally, you can't purchase any rear speakers either. Now, with all of that in mind, let me get on to my subjective opinion. Now, first off, in terms of the sub-bass extension, it should come as no surprise to say that it is quite cut short. Indeed, due to the emission of a subwoofer and the soundbar unit itself tailing off at around 50 Hz, it means that you're not going to get that low-end rumble and that pronounced extension. Yes, there is some that can be heard to a certain degree, but it really won't compete with systems out there that have a dedicated subwoofer unit. Now on the flip side, the mid-bass is actually done really well, both in terms of the quantity and quality. I had no complaints whatsoever. I actually tuned the bass level to level 3, and you might have picked it out via pre-adjaced track, whereby when I was adjusting the different bass levels as to how that impacts the overall sound presentation of the soundbar. Of course, the more you go, it's going to drown out the mids, but the lower you go, it means that you'll have, well, less bass presence. Frankly, I think somewhat of a midway, and of course, depending on your room's acoustic, will be the best way of setting up this soundbar. Now, this does actually bring me onto its mid-range, and here it does have a pure voice technology. You might have noticed quite a bit of a difference when I had it enabled and disabled when I had my piece to camera. Actually, I had it enabled permanently even when I was listening to music because I felt that it positively impacted the lower mid-range, indeed bringing them out to the foreground rather than throwing them all the way to the background. Now, it can't quite compete with some other soundbars out there in the market that come in at roughly the same price tag. So, for example, the likes of the Majority Sierra 2.1 or the likes of, for example, ones offered from Creative or indeed Sonos, but it's actually not too bad. It still kept me pretty engaged. It's just worth bearing in mind over here is that it has a classic JBL sound signature and therefore it is a little bit pushed back and V-shaped. As for the highs, they extend relatively well, although due to having only 2 tweeters, it means it's somewhat limited in terms of how well it can extend at the top end. You'll still get that toe tapping feeling, and specifically with a bit of EQ added on via the app, you might find it to be actually excelling a little bit better, at least in comparison to other soundbars that come in at its price point. It is absolutely no match to soundbars that cost over £350. Now, aside from its sound frequency range, I should also mention its Soundstage, and here it's not too bad on the whole, whereby the instrument separation and the overall width and depth are done pretty well, keeping you relatively engaged. The problem, however, is that when I compare it to some of its rivals, it's no match. Take, for example, the likes of alternatives that come from Panasonic, Sonos, Majority, Denon, or of course some other alternatives out there that will be down in the description. Here, I feel that a lot of the alternatives provide a little bit of that wider soundstage and therefore keeping you a little bit more engaged, specifically when you're consuming movie content. Now on that note, this does bring me onto a little movie demo, and here I'm going to use Transformers Age of Extinction. I'll be trying to demonstrate how it sounds with actual Dolby Atmos metadata fed through it and comparing it to Dolby Digital. Make sure you look at the annotations on your screen to understand how the soundbar is running. Now those little clips hopefully gave you a bit of a taster as to how this soundbar deals with Dolby Atmos, in other words heightened metadata. But it should not be confused that the fact that this soundbar does not actually output Dolby Atmos, but rather feeds the signal through its HDMI port and then has a virtual Dolby Atmos experience. Indeed, over here it cannot compete with soundbars that actually have a physical upward firing driver. Now, nonetheless, JBL should be commended for their use of the Atmos technology, whereby the heightened metadata is fed through via software and algorithm and therefore gives you a bit more of that room-filling experience, which will certainly be appreciated by a lot of consumers. But on the flip side, by doing this, it will take away from the overall accuracy and therefore will sound a little less direct, specifically if you're consuming content that you're very much accustomed to and then coming to the soundbar, you might feel that something is a little bit missing or a little bit off. But that's just due to the virtual Dolby Atmos experience. Now it can be toggled on or off via the remote control or indeed via the app, and it should also be mindful that this virtual Dolby effect is only present when there's a Dolby audio signal being fed through. In other words, it will not be supported on regular terrestrial TV, but will be supported on terrestrial HD TV, and will not be supported on the likes of YouTube, which uses PCM. So with all that in mind, it brings me on to my verdict of the JBL Bar 300. And here it's actually a complete package whereby the overall sound frequency range is decent. The virtual Dolby Atmos experience is appreciated. It's got a sleek and stylish design, app integration, and also Wi-Fi support for music streaming services. The problem, however, is its overall asking price. At the time of filming and in the UK, it comes in at a whopping £350. And here I simply can't recommend it given the alternatives that are out there on the market, specifically those that also offer a subwoofer unit, therefore giving you much better low-end prowess. Some of the alternatives will be down in the description below for your own consideration, and are the ones I would actively recommend. Effectively, what I'm trying to say over here is that I wish the JBL Bar 300 came in at a cheaper price point. And at that price point, say for example at £200 to £250, I could have seen myself more actively recommending it because it would be more in line with some of its competitors. Now I'd be intrigued to hear what you make of JBL's solution down in the comment section below. And if you've liked this independent detailed review, definitely do consider dropping a like, subscribing and hitting that bell notification, all of which would be greatly appreciated. As such, I've been Totally Dubbed, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves, and goodbye.